Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to I.O. Radio with your host, Adam Smith and Sal Bayat.
Hi, everybody.
And today we've got a very special show featuring a guest that we're actually quite big fans of. His name is Dr. Nicholas Weaver, and he has previously been a computer science professor at University of Berkeley in California. This guy has a BA in astrophysics and computer science, as well as a PhD in computer science. But what makes him special and of interest to us is he is one of the earliest critics of crypto and blockchain technology. Now, this is a guy whose expertise is computer security, so he knows all about it. And he's penned articles going back years criticizing Bitcoin and blockchain technology. He's been one of the few people out there that has actually said the emperor has no clothes. And it's a real treat to get him on. We're going to talk with him about some specific questions and some general questions. And we're also going to ask him about where he thinks the state of computer security and technology and crypto is going.
We are very much looking forward to speaking with Dr. Nick Weaver. It's going to be an interesting discussion. I have a lot of questions. I know you do too. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where this goes.
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
All right.
A, B, C, D, E, F.
Hi, Nick. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Is it? Do we call you Nick or Nicholas? I always see your name as Nicholas everywhere.
It's written Nicholas. It's pronounced Nick.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. So, Nick, I was reading through your bio. I was reading some of your papers, some of the articles you've written. But in your bio, something caught my attention, which is that you graduated with a degree in astrophysics and computer science. I'm just curious, what made you lean towards the computer science as opposed to the astrophysics?
It's because astrophysics was a prize for dropping out of physics. So I get into Berkeley as a freshman. I decide I'm going to do a physics chem double major. That lasts midway through the first semester when organic chemistry kicked my butt.
Okay.
I got a C+. I did better than half the class. So I was going to just do physics. And physics was doing great until second semester, sophomore year, when I took quantum dynamics, thermomechanics, the physics electronics lab, and a computer science class with no prerequisites because I heard the instructor was cool. My grades that semester were B- in thermo, B- in electronics lab, C in quantum. I deserved an F. And A+ in the computer science class. Decided I was in the wrong major. And at Berkeley, the astrophysics degree at the time, the number of classes you had to take went down if you were a double major, more than just the normal double major. So I was able to take 3 upper division astrophysics classes to get the astrophysics degree to go along with my CS degree.
Gotcha. So CS was always something that you were drawn to and you did well at.
Yes.
Okay.
Although I didn't major in it until the end of my second year at Berkeley.
Gotcha. And you went on to get a PhD in computer science as well.
Yep. Because I didn't want to work for a living during the .com boom.
So, okay. So you were an academic. You did your PhD in computer science. When did you first hear about Bitcoin? And how long did it take you to start really looking at it and being critical of it?
So we heard about it early on in 2011, 2012. And I was part of a large research group at the time, and our focus was online criminality. That we're sick of playing whack-a-mole on bad guys. That's something not fun. Let's play whack-a-mole on their business models. And that means understanding how things get monetized, etc. And so we started looking at Bitcoin very early on. So a colleague of mine, Sarah Michael-John, she was the one who did the first work on Bitcoin tracing. And I was part of a group paper where what we did is we looked at bad guys taking over computers to mine Bitcoin. Because back at the time, before you had the ASICs and the GPU farms, you could make money with CPU mining, and Why make money CPU mining on your own CPU when you can just break into a lot of computers and do it there?
Gotcha.
I watched the Silk Road case with interest, before the arrest and after. And so that got me interested in a lot of legal issues on it. And at the start, it was kind of this interesting little digression that it was clearly useless for payments. So right from the start, it was clear that the volatile cryptocurrencies would never work for payments that would be processed by the normal system.
Are you talking about mainly because of its limited transaction processing?
No, it's actually more fundamental. It's a combination of volatility and irreversibility.
So this
So
is
the volatility.
Your 2013 article, right? Where you wrote the biggest problem you felt with Bitcoin was its immutability.
Yeah. Its irreversibility plus its volatility makes it impossible for payments because the price is always bouncing up and down. So the receiver is going to turn it into actual money. So that means in order for the system to balance, the sender has to turn it into cryptocurrency and immediately transfer it. And the process of buying cryptocurrency is inherently painful because there's what we'd call an impedance mismatch between the rest of the banking system and cryptocurrency. The rest of the banking system has this model: anything electronic has to be reversible. There has to be a limited undo button to mitigate fraud, to detect that something's going on and undo it.
And that's the result of regulation, right? That's primarily the reason it's there. Huh?
It's not just because of regulation, it's because it actually enables fraud mitigation. That in a irreversible system, you can only prevent fraud. Once fraud occurs, you're out of luck. Mm-hmm. With a reversible system, you can, for at least a limited period of time, detect after something went wrong and clean up the mess.
So it ends up
being able to do detection and response makes your security posture so much easier to deal with.
And I guess that's a fundamental element of computer security. It's not merely prevention, but you have to take appropriate steps to be able to clean up after the damage and avoid it again.
Yes, that computer security is, you've got prevention, you've got detection and response, and prevention only is really hard in a lot of cases. It's a lot easier if you can detect and respond. And so the banking system has this model of detect and respond as being a fundamental feature of modern banking. Mm-hmm. And the cryptocurrency folks just think that that's a bug and not a feature, and have built a system that allows no chargebacks, no undo button. And as a consequence, it's actually still incredibly hard to buy cryptocurrency.
Right. So in 2013, you wrote this article, I guess, for Wired Magazine, and I'll throw it up on the screen and editing it later, where you talk about immutability being one of the biggest problems. And I find it interesting, and I'm going to steel man the crypto bro side of the argument, just because anybody who's listening to this is one of the first things they would want to ask you, which is going to make the rest of us cringe. But at the time you wrote that article, the price of Bitcoin was about $1,000 per BTC. Never mind that a year later it was 297. But if you had bought that crypto, if you had bought Bitcoin when you wrote that article, it would be worth 30x now, according to these people. What's your response to that?
And I still can't buy anything with the Bitcoin. That's the thing. In this decade since, the number of things you can buy with cryptocurrency has basically stayed constant at effectively zero legal stuff. And the payments for using cryptocurrency these days, the problem is it's just ransomware. $1 million payments to bad guys is the only use case for Bitcoin these days.
Although I want to point out something. I I think you came up with another interesting use case where you said it is a great gimmick to help IT departments get extra funding.
Yes. So overall, blockchain is a buzzword. Blockchain is a garbage buzzword. And in fact, I have my iron law of blockchain. Anyone who says blockchain can solve X has no clue about X and can be safely ignored. Having a high reliability bullshit filter makes your life incredibly easy.
Nice.
But it is a great buzzword for confusing upper management. I need to build improved back-end infrastructure. I need a new database. I need to do this. I need to do that. I want $10 million. The VP of actually getting stuff done is going to laugh at me because the VPs don't want to spend money. But if instead I tell the VC to tell the board, we're going to implement a blockchain solution. And what I do under the hood is a new database, new everything else. And I spend $9,999,000 on that and spend the remaining $1,000 taking the log of the information as it comes in, cryptographically signing it and going, woo, I have a blockchain. Yep. And I've solved my problem.
So as long as there's marketing materials you can attach to it, then it's potentially useful.
So,
yep.
Given that one of the most obvious, quote, use cases for crypto is criminal activity, is it possible that Monero, the so-called security token that can't be traced, might be one of the more, and I hate to use this legit quote in quotes, applications for crypto technology? What are your thoughts on Monero, and do you really think it's secure?
I haven't looked at Monero enough to really discuss its security, or basically its anonymity features. However, it basically should be completely cut off from the normal banking system. And if you look at some of the upcoming rules that are being proposed in the EU and the US, etc., it does. What I don't understand is why one thing takes off, but the other doesn't. So Monero has taken off a lot more in the mental space than Zcash. And Zcash has good anonymity protections. It's basically Tornado Cash is built into the fundamental protocol.
So as a computer security guy, I'm reminded of, like, I wonder if Monero is just nakedly being used for criminal activity, why the authorities are not infiltrating it, or maybe one reason why it's not, being targeted is because it could also be infiltrated. I'm reminded of the FBI's Trojan Shield operation, where they had all of these secure phones that were being sold and they had the inside connection to them. Do you think it's possible that Monero or some relative system that's attached to it could be a big honeypot that's being used, and that's why it's avoided scrutiny thus far?
No, I just think it's too small a problem to matter. That the bad guy's problem with Bitcoin has always been turning Bitcoin into cash. Mm-hmm. And it still is the problem for them. Monero basically has even more annoying problems on turning Monero into cash. That if you think the FBI and the IRS would look at you sideways if you took 100K worth of Bitcoin from a mixer, threw it into Coinbase and turned it into cash, they will really look at you funny if you do it with Monero. And so Monero's limitation in practice is not the security of the coin itself, but the convertibility.
So I have another question about encryption in general. Obviously, you're expert in computer security, and we know that Bitcoin uses SHA-256 as its base encryption algorithm. Everybody says this is uncrackable. Do you believe that, or do you think there's eventually could be a point where quantum computing or something like that, where all of these lost Bitcoin wallets could be accessed? And do you think there may be actual projects where people are trying to like get into Satoshi's wallet as we speak?
Okay. Firstly, the algorithm isn't just SHA-256. It's elliptic curve cryptography and the like. If somebody comes up with a quantum computer, we have bigger issues to deal with than Bitcoin. But also, first of all, it's actually a very interesting question if one is even buildable. That for the past 2 decades, basically, I think the number of digits of factoring you can do is still in the 2-digit number range. So it's an open question whether that's actually doable or not.
But there have been some encryption algorithms that may not have been brute force broken, right? But they could have been cracked through under reverse engineering the formulas too, right?
No, the cryptography in Bitcoin is solid. If a quantum computer comes, yes, Bitcoin gets broken because of the public key cryptography, but then so many other things are broken and we're in a world of misery. And I have retired to a Kaczynski shack because I'm sick of dealing with computers.
Fair enough.
But the other thing is Bitcoin actually has a design that is slightly resistant to quantum computing. That the address you send a Bitcoin to is not a public key, but the hash of a public key. You don't know the public key yet until that address is spent. And so as long as you always take your change and put it into new wallets, you actually are even immune from quantum computing, assuming that the quantum computer is not so fast that it can hijack your transaction as it goes. So there's a lot more concern about quantum computing. A lot more things will be affected. I don't see it making a difference on Bitcoin.
Understood. I wanted to go back to something you were talking about earlier, which is you said you started looking at Bitcoin because you weren't interested in playing whack-a-mole. You wanted to attack the actual business model. And so with the advent of cryptocurrency, with its promotion, it seems like we're actually in a worse place than we were when you started that journey. Yes. So could you speak to that? And is there a solution? If we haven't been successful in the last 10 years, what are the steps that we have to take now to actually solve the problem of cybercrime?
So the thing is one of the lessons learned, or one of the things that Bitcoin has done, is it committed a crime against me personally. It has made somebody with fairly strong libertarian tendencies believe in the need for jackbooted enforcement of money laundering laws. And I'll explain. So 5-7 years ago, there was a first wave of ransomware. So in ransomware, bad guys break into computers, encrypt the data, and say, pay me or your data will never be seen again. The first wave of ransomware targeted individuals. And basically, you had a choice. You could either pay with Bitcoin or you could pay with green dot money packs. And nobody used Bitcoin because try explaining to your parents how to buy Bitcoin. It's just a pain. And so what would happen is everybody used green dot, and the government got sick of green dot messing around. They were basically not doing anti-money laundering responsibilities. They got basically jawed at by Congress and the regulators on the down low and changed how they did things. And so these days, a green dot card, to actually get a card, you have to do all the know your customer stuff and everything else. And green dot disappeared as a ransomware vector for payments And the first generation of ransomware just disappeared completely because Bitcoin is unusable for sending $100 ransoms. Recently, we've seen the rise of what's known as big game ransomware, where somebody breaks into, say, Colonial Pipeline, demands $5 million payable in Bitcoin. And this is a direct consequence of Bitcoin's existence, the ability to move large sums of money that the normal banking system would reject. And physical transfers wouldn't work because $5 million in cash is 50 kilograms. That's 2 full weight suitcases that the bad guys have to pick up. Oh, and when you pick up, we have a gift for you from the Marine over on the next hill. It's a .308 caliber because you bleeping took down our gas supply for a week. So Bitcoin's the only game in town for those guys. If we want to solve ransomware, it's we make sure that you cannot extract $5 million of Bitcoin and turn it into cash.
So it has to be the banning of the exchange of any kind of speculative crypto token for fiat currency.
No, it's know your customer applies to where the money comes from.
Right. And thanks to blockchain, where there's a public ledger, it's hard to hide that.
Except it isn't. It is and it isn't. So what you really need is affirmative, positive evidence of legitimacy before you accept cryptocurrency. And basically, any cryptocurrency exchange doesn't implement strong anti-money laundering controls, not only should be viewed as tainted, but any cryptocurrency coming from that exchange should be viewed as tainted.
So you would actually say that you would remove the fungibility in some way of Bitcoin. There would be some Bitcoin that would be illegitimate and some that would be legitimate based on its source or its involvement in criminal activity.
Yes. And if you actually look at the regulations that are starting to go into force on cryptocurrency, the so-called travel rule stuff, that actually is about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tether has a blacklist too of addresses and wallets they won't cash out.
Right, but Tether should operate under a whitelist approach. That a stablecoin issuer, I've got an editorial I'm writing on this. A stablecoin issuer should only allow transfers between cryptocurrency wallets that have been positively identified by the stablecoin issuer. You do that, you no longer have the money laundering vehicle.
But like at a more fundamental level, why should we even allow Tether to exist? Like, is there an actual use case for a stable coin in this way, which is predominantly used to, I mean, really, I would argue that Tether is used as a way of preventing you from withdrawing real dollars out of the crypto fraud. So it allows you to exchange, instead of exchanging for fiat, you can take it out in quote unquote Tether. And that means that these schemes don't collapse as quickly. So why is it that we would want to keep Tether around?
I don't. But the problem is there's, let's face it, Tether and Circle are the casino chips for the cryptocurrency casino.
Unregulated casino chips.
Unregulated casino chips. And there's a huge push these days to regulate them and somehow make them legitimate, because if you just ban them as being Liberty Reserve 2.0, the whole edifice collapses. And unfortunately, we're in a world where Are
you insinuating that politically it's not possible to do this? There are too many people who are powerful, who are wealthy, who are invested in this ecosystem?
Right. But if you require positive money laundering controls rather than this blacklist model on the stablecoin issuers, it basically means that the stablecoin industry in effect collapses because, well, their real use is that they allow large amounts of money to be moved outside the entire notion of capital controls and money laundering controls. And if you get rid of that, they go away as a problem, and they'll go away in practice too, because their feature goes away.
So it's a more, in your opinion, it's a more practical avenue. There might be too much resistance to outright banning some of these things, but if you simply argue that we need to apply the same laws to stablecoins, then that effectively has the same result.
Yes. And it's fairly simple. It's that the stablecoin issuer shall be deemed the money transmitter for all transactions that involve the stablecoin. You do that, the stablecoins cease to be a problem, because this forces them to do positive money laundering control. And the thing is the excuses to not do this are you don't want to, because the costs are actually pretty reasonable. Green Dot does money laundering controls on every single Green Dot prepaid card, and they're dealing with a industry where they're not dealing with all that much money per customer. It's doable. It's the cryptocurrency stablecoin issuers don't want to.
Gotcha. And how much do you feel that the crypto industry then is propped up by money laundering, people who have large amounts of cash who need to wash it? Do you think that that's a significant portion of where the liquidity to support some of these schemes come from?
I think so, but let's face it, the entire space is one entire fraud that's a turducken of scamitude.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
So to start with, Bitcoin is a self-assembled Ponzi scheme. The only value of a cryptocurrency is what somebody else will pay for it later on. It wasn't set out to create a Ponzi scheme, but it is under the hood a negative sum Ponzi scheme, because every dollar that somebody makes in Bitcoin had to come from somebody else. And because of how Bitcoin works, a lot of it ends up going up the smokestacks and as e-waste.
Well, I mean, Nakamoto said themselves that as more people use the system or mine, that the value of the token will increase, which will then encourage more people to use the system, which will then increase the value more. So,
but critically, the value only comes from other people's money going in.
Right, marketing and hype.
Or willingness to expend electricity on mining the token.
Same diff, because when you mine the token, you're basically shoving it up the smokestack.
Exactly.
So let me jump in here real quick, since we're kind of all in agreement that there doesn't seem to be any kind of non-criminal use case for crypto. I'm curious, as a university educator, what your take is on MIT's digital currency initiative. Obviously, there's money to be made pandering to such an industry, even if its objectives are arguably unscientific and sketchy. Do you think there's actual legitimacy to this organization? Because there seems to be some kind of quid pro quo that I notice regarding the development of Bitcoin and this MIT organization's benefactors like Blockstream, who have their own level 2 solutions and are also kind of being benefactors to the development team, and they're keeping the core protocol almost stunted from being scalable so that their L2 Lightning Network can be thought of as a second solution. What are your thoughts about the MIT organization and what these industries are doing with the protocol?
I'm not so familiar with MIT, but there's a larger blockchain virus in academia. So there are a few people who truly believe in financial privacy. So Matt Green, for example, I respect Matt Green and I respect his viewpoint. I think he's totally wrong because see ransomware. But that's what led him to develop Zcash. And that's fine. The problem is what has happened is there's a non-trivial number of academics who see this as a way of basically ripping people off without understanding that they're ripping people off. You create your startup, as a professor. Your startup is literally privacy-preserving machine learning on the blockchain. You issue a token that's utility for privacy-preserving machine learning on the blockchain. You sell it to people who buy it not because they want to do privacy-preserving machine learning on the blockchain, but because they think that it'll go on, and basically it's an unregistered security. You dump it on retail, and that's your real business model, is securities fraud for the purposes of A16Z. There's far too many academics in that camp. Those who get involved in cryptocurrency companies, and the cryptocurrency is basically securities fraud, and they get away with it, and
they're selling academic legitimacy.
Yeah.
It also allows venture capital firms to get paid off before having a minimum viable product.
Yeah, that it's basically securities fraud by proxy. But from the academic viewpoint, what it really comes down to is academics have their own business model. So for the most part, what happens in the cryptocurrency space among serious computer scientists is most of them look at it, they go, so they looked at it in 2013 or 2015 or 2017. They go, this is BS. I'm going to ignore it. A few people become true believers and loot the retail because, hey, good for them. They're ripping people off, but they're having fun. And so what has happened is the academics end up being selected for those who are true believers or those who are grifters. I am in a fairly unique position of having a business model that allowed me to keep following the space long after I realized it was a steaming pile of bovine excrement composed of bovine excrement, because I could turn it into papers anyway. So I can turn it into academic papers that basically the joke is I mine the comedy Godel and turn it into both academic and non-academic writing. And so I have actually had a business model that has allowed me to follow this space for a decade, even though it is, to my mind, hot garbage.
Has there been any blowback to your criticism of crypto?
I don't know. That at least publicly, no. If anything else, I don't know.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about, you had said that you admire Bitcoin, the protocol. And I'm wondering if, and that was in 2013, has anything changed, or is that still the case?
Yes. So originally in Bitcoin, I thought the proof of work bit was really clever. As a way of doing the Sybil resistance.
Yep.
In retrospect, by about 2016, I realized that no, that is actually abominably bad, because proof of work for Sybil resistance doesn't give just a floor on the attacker's cost. It gives a ceiling on the protection. So say an attacker needs to expend X work to get Y dollars. If the amount of work X costs more than Y, the attacker won't attack. If the amount of work costs less than Y, the attacker will always win. Yes. So the proof of work acts as a ceiling on your security. But it's very inefficient at that, because the defender is having to do that work continuously, whether or not they're under attack. And a security system where you continually have to spend a huge amount of resources to protect against a given attack, whether or not you're under attack, is just economic nonsense.
Yeah, well, it's an economic defense. It's not a real true defense in a way.
Well, economic defenses are fine. They have to be efficient. If, say, I'm protecting a $10 item, and if I spend $8 a day protecting the item, it gets stolen. And if I have to spend $11 a day to keep it from getting stolen, that's economic protection that works. You aren't going to steal my $10, but it's complete nonsense in terms of practicality because I'm spending $11 a day to protect a $10 all-time resource. And that's what proof of work in Bitcoin does. It's basically spending more than you are protecting when you average it out over time.
Absolutely. And I mean, in terms of protections, or sort of maybe even attacks on the protocol itself, in Burn It with Fire, that presentation, you were talking about, listen, one of the ways to combat these things are to attack the protocols themselves. So you're almost advocating a form of civil disobedience. Do you think that was successful at all? Do you think that's still worthy of pursuit? Or do you think the real solution here lies in, as you also indicated in Burn It with Fire, enforcing the laws we already have?
At this point, I am 100% in enforce the laws. That playing games with the protocols are fun, but the bad guys will do that anyway. So all this DeFi stuff, a DeFi protocol is really just a piñata for black hats. And one of the great things about that is the Department of Justice just made clear that stealing $9 million and giving $7.5 million back and keeping the rest as an agreed to white hat pen testing fee is no protection at all from the feds going after you anyway. So, hey, bad guys, keep all the money. It's just
your opinion, not financial advice.
Not legal advice, not financial advice, but if you observe, the DOJ prosecutes you just as much when you say you are a white hat and then return 75% or 80% of the takings. Why should you return 75% of the take when the DOJ will prosecute you anyway?
Yep.
Yeah, and as you said, if you've got crypto, you still don't have money. It still has to be converted, and that's where they can get you there too.
Yeah, that turning cryptocurrency into real money is actually a hard problem.
I have a question in regards to Bitcoin and academia. So this isn't so much about the computer science side, but the economic side. I've really found it difficult to find actual good, credible economic analysis of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general. In your travels, have you come along any researchers or any academics who are actually speaking about this? Or because what I've encountered is exactly what you've described, which are people that are attempting to profit. They're either true believers or they're really trying to sell their latest startup idea to someone. Is there anyone doing good criticism of the economics of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
There's no need because it's complete bogus. That the economic ideas behind Bitcoin are Austrian gold bug economics that are just complete lunacy. That there's a quip that a computer scientist looks at Bitcoin and goes, the computer science is garbage, but hey, maybe the economics are interesting. An economist looks at computers or at Bitcoin, goes, the computing looks interesting, but the economics is just total nonsense. And so like the econ faculty are actually a bit better than the CS faculty, because if the econ faculty wanted to make money, they'd be business faculty and consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the economic analysis of the space is, it's steaming hot pile of bogosity, so we're just going to ignore it.
So the idea of a deflationary currency has been discredited long ago.
Yes, it was discredited 100+ years ago. That economically, the cryptocurrency community has basically been speed running half a millennia of financial failures and have run out of financial failures to speed run, and so are repeating the same ones over and over again while huffing crystal meth.
So where do you think things are going. Obviously, this industry has lasted longer than any of us really expected it to last. Um, do you see it fizzling out, or do you see it flaming out?
The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. I have no clue when or how it's truly going to go away, but I think the implosions of FTX, etc., have made the notion of institutional money gone for a decade. There's basically very little money left in the system. And I actually suspect what will happen, this is just suspicion, not investment advice. I would not actually bet that this is going to happen. This is just what I think would happen, is the Bitcoin miners. That Bitcoin mining is deeply negative sum. And the Bitcoin miners have been spending billions of dollars on electricity and generating e-waste over the past few years. The problem is for the longest time, I think the miners have been hoarding, that they've been hoping that the Bitcoin price goes up and have been gambling basically that that the price goes up and they can cash out then. But what I think is going to happen is one of the mid-sized plus cryptocurrency miners is going to actually go bankrupt. Chapter 11. And the creditors are going to say, okay, sell the bloody Bitcoin.
Yep.
And the problem is the Bitcoin market for real money is really thin. And so if you try to dump, say, $20 million, $30 million, $50 million of Bitcoin on Coinbase, you would probably start a death spiral. And so if you have 2 or 3 mining concerns where you've got 300 million, 500 million in debt that has to be paid for with Bitcoin, you're going to get the possibility of triggering a death spiral.
It's very interesting you say that, because I've always contended that what we should be looking for is a collapse of hash rate, which will precede the collapse of any price. The exchanges obviously have a vested interest in manipulating and making sure the price is high so they can extract as much fiat liquidity from people who want to enter into the scheme, but the miners need to actually pay their bills. They need to pay the electricity bills. And so what we should see is a miner attempting to liquidate, or a miner ceasing operations. So we should see a hash rate spike before the exchanges reflect any kind of price decrease. And in fact, they could try to manipulate and maintain that elevated price even while redemptions for Bitcoin are skyrocketing.
I don't think they can necessarily maintain it because they don't have the money either. I don't think there'll necessarily be a drop in hash rate before a drop in price. I think what'll happen is somebody who's still going, still heavily hashing, has already bet the farm. That the cryptocurrency miners have already bet the farm that the price goes up and they can sell out then. Because the power consumption and the hash rate really hasn't gone down with the big collapse off the peak.
Well, there's something else that's going on too that complicates this model. We had Jackie Sawicki on from the Texas Coalition Against Crypto Mining, and she talked about the mining consortiums that have been going into Texas that have been working these sweetheart deals with the local power company to buy power, and then during peak times when the grid needs it, selling it back to the state at a profit. And according to her, that's the primary way these mining consortiums are making money. It's not even off of the Bitcoin. It's by brokering this electricity and then dumping it back on the grid.
They've effectively become middleman for power distribution.
Well, they aren't even really middlemen. They're taking advantage of a regulatory arbitrage opportunity, yes, a flaw in the regulations that allows them to do that. And it's a huge problem, but it's one that I think is hopefully going to go away because it's really only Texas. No other state is that stupid. And Texas has its own power grid and has its own problems anyway.
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see. But it's funny how these crypto companies keep pivoting rather than remind anybody that the scheme that they were promoting 6 months or a year ago has not come to fruition. They just keep reinventing new things and just slightly, changing the names of stuff. And still, nothing they're doing seems to serve any productive purpose.
Well, fundamentally, it starts out with a model of zero sum. In practice, it's deeply negative sum. It can provably only destroy value.
Yes. Yeah, there's no useful work actually being done. So any value that's being expended is ultimately not doing something economically productive.
Yeah.
So let's move a little bit laterally and talk about the status of the internet and the technology there, if you don't mind. So one of the things that the people in the crypto industry, one of the terms they love to talk about is Web3. So they've now coined Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. The traditional definition supposedly is Web 1 was the original internet where everything was mostly decentralized. Web 2 is when corporations kind of came in as the market matured and started creating these walled gardens. And now they're proposing Web 3 as, depending upon who you ask, it could be the greatest thing since white bread, or it's just Web 2 with tokens added. What are your thoughts on that?
Web 3 is an absolute scam. And it's an amusingly absolute scam. So let's look at technically how the web works today. Your web browser is a distributed computation platform. Some computation occurring on the server, some computation occurring on the web browser. And together it creates the web application that you're looking at. The idea with Web 3 is to hype the cryptocurrency by taking that existing model. You still have the browser, you still have the web server, but adding an additional layer of crap that offloads some small fraction of the computation and data storage from the browser and the server onto the cryptocurrency. And so to start with, it doesn't simplify your tech stack. It only complicates it. There's this great diagram that some proponent of the cryptocurrency space did, which shows the Web 2 version and then the Web 3 version that just adds on all this garbage. So to start with, it makes things more complex. Then it doesn't make things decentralized in any meaningful fashion because it depends on things like MetaMask and Infura and all these other things that interpret the blockchain data because the actual blockchain data is garbage, which are centralized services that will block Tornado Cash and the like. So congratulations, you're not censorship resistant. You're actually worse than the existing web. And then you actually look at the computational power of these devices of, say, Ethereum. Ethereum costs on the order of $45 a second to run in terms of gas fees. And in terms of compute, it is 1/5,000th or so that of this $75 Raspberry Pi. The entire Ethereum world computer is such hot garbage that it's completely unusable for anything that actually counts. And all this layer 2 stuff, all that stuff, okay, you add a 0 to the performance. So you make the performance 10 times better or 100 times better. 100 times better is still 10 times, 20 times worse than a single Raspberry Pi. Web3 is a grift.
There we go.
I like that matter of fact. So another question I've got is, do you think the current problems with Reddit, Meta, and Twitter where you have these client-driven communities that are being squeezed and aggressively exploited by corporations. Where do you see things evolving from this late stage in the game where people are disgusted with corporate walled gardens? Is there a technological solution to this problem, or is this a social or political issue? Can you envision a new system where people that are frustrated with the existing social media could populate that would be superior to what's currently available? And if so, what would it look like?
Well, 2 million people a month are on Mastodon now. That's what you're describing, is a federated system. And there are issues with building federated systems. They're a lot harder to build. You've got all these other things going on. And also the Mastodon folks who maintain the core protocol have certain, let's say, religious beliefs about post length and quoting and stuff like that that are just actually not true. Quote tweets do not actually increase abuse. They actually instead make it easier to have conversation. So we've seen what those systems are. And in fact, we built those 30 years ago, that in many ways, Reddit is a successor to good old Usenet News.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the successor may start to look like it again, or WordPress sites, or blogging, or all these things. The centralization stuff has an advantage of efficiency, though. And that's the thing. There's a lot of efficiency at scale that you don't get in a federalized system. But we've done federalized systems for decades, and it doesn't need cryptocurrency to do it.
So do you think that it's just human nature, once these walled gardens get a certain market dominance, that it's going to be hard to dethrone them? It's obviously hard to, there's no other alternate system that could just take the place of Reddit given its scale right now.
It's hard to dethrone, and the bigger problem is that late stage capitalism rewards shitification. So
this is the Cory Doctorow term that he wrote about.
So basically, you make a service, you attract a lot of users, and then you make it shitty because that's how you think you can make money.
And you just think that's a natural evolution. There's nothing that can really be done to work around that?
Not really. It's a regulatory problem. It's a social problem, because we've shown that we can do technically federated systems. Mastodon works.
Mm-hmm. And what about it? Wikipedia, to me, seems to be a success story of something that actually has continued to not be overly corrupt, I think.
Well, Wikipedia has this very interesting business model. They don't. That Wikipedia editors are doing it for fun. So it's the same user-driven content stuff that Reddit and all these other sites do. It's that Wikipedia as an institution is a 501c3 nonprofit that doesn't pretend like it needs to make a profit, nor pretend that it needs to sell ads or anything else. So not selling ads means doesn't need surveillance capitalism. And as a consequence, it's not a big institution in terms of actual money and funding and the like, and keeps going, because that's the other thing. That dirty little secret is computers are cheap. That computing infrastructure these days is so cheap that it doesn't take that much money to run Wikipedia.
I gotcha. So I understand one of your areas of expertise is botnets. What do you think is the current state of botnet technology right now? Is there a new generation of botnets that are particularly evasive and insidious?
Not botnets per se, but the hands-on keyboard ransomware games that there's been no real need to make more aggressive botnets than what has already been done, because you can already do terabyte DOSes and everything else. The real innovation has been in the ransomware gangs being very, very good at internal pivoting, and also ransomware gangs where they basically look for 0 days. So like this Clop ransomware on MoveIt. So MoveIt is a secure file transfer appliance. Email's insecure. They need to send you some financial documents, whatever, securely. They load it up onto the appliance. The appliance emails it to you. You click on a link and download it. And yeah, well.
And that's responsible for the major data breaches that we've been reading about, I guess, with various government agencies and stuff like that.
Government agencies, commercial agencies, etc. And what happened is the ransomware gang responsible for this actually probably got themselves a copy of the appliance. They probably paid for it. They found a couple of 0 days in it, and then basically pillaged hundreds of institutions and are basically saying, give us $5 million in Bitcoin or your data gets spilled onto the internet. Have a nice day. And they're able to do this because, hey, if you even get one payoff of $5 million from pillaging 100 institutions, that pays for a lot of R&D and bug hunting. And it's made easier when they use SQL injection vulnerabilities. There are certain classes of vulnerabilities that, to my mind, should incur strict liability. SQL injection and command injection are among them.
Yeah, because that seems to be, that's just gross incompetence at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Nick, it's been really a pleasure talking with you. And, you know, we've been following you for quite a while. I'm wondering, so you're no longer teaching at Berkeley. What's next in your plans?
So this fall, I'm actually going to be teaching at Davis. So I'm going to be teaching at Davis. I still work at ICSI, and I've been doing R&D on drones. So like I'm trying to design a small autopilot for teaching purposes, because the existing autopilots have various issues. I've also been working on a autopilot design which interfaces to a Raspberry Pi compute module. I've got my previous prototype here, where the idea is you've got a off-the-shelf autopilot running normally with a Raspberry Pi host computer, and people have done this before, but the ones they've done are a lot bigger and a lot more expensive. And I want to do it cheaply, because once you can do it cheaply, there's all sorts of cool things you can do.
Could you please call it full self-flying?
No, because I want to make crashing okay.
All right.
Solving the problem 100% or 99.999% reliable is really hard. You remove nines from the reliability, you remove zeros from the price. So I don't want to build a $10,000 autonomous drone that's highly reliable. I want to build a $500 autonomous drone where if it crashes, I don't give a fig because it was just $500.
Partial self-flying, the more honest moniker.
So when you say self-flying, you mean basically that you would program a flight plan into this and then just launch it and it would go, like, presumably to a particular location and take pictures or something and come back?
More like do other tasks that require vision. So I live in Napa. There's this invasive species called the European starling that will eat lots and lots of grapes from your vineyard. There's such a problem that they will literally cover every grapevine with netting over entire acres to keep these bloody things out. Or, if you'd rather, you can actually hire one of at least two companies in the local area that will come out with a trained falcon to chase away the birds. Now, trained falcons are highly expensive. Not only that, they have a very slow production rate. It would be really nice to take something like this little drone, have it fly around the vineyard and basically chase away the birds like a falcon would.
Interesting.
The problem is doing that is that's a fixed wing. It's actually kind of a real pain to control. It's pretty easy to crash. Which means if I wanted to do a business of chase away birds with that thing, I need skilled pilots. Skilled drone pilots are as expensive, if not more, than trained falcons. If I can make the plane fly itself visually, self-identify, this is the birds I go after, chase after them, etc., I no longer need skilled pilots. I only need certified pilots. And getting the skill needed to fly one of those things well is hard. I know, I don't have it. The necessary to get the remote pilot's license that allows me to fly the things commercially is easy. I know because I got one.
Nice. Well, Adam, you must really like this project because it's in service of making better wine.
I do like my wine. I'm surprised that you couldn't take that a step further and have the drones identify the birds, like have designated patrol areas, and if anything flies into it, they just kind of spook it away.
Oh, yes, that would be the eventual goal. But under the current regulations, you need a certified pilot with eyes on the drone at all times.
Interesting.
Getting a waiver for non-line of sight, that is being able to operate without somebody there, that's a very intensive process. And the only way I could see to do that in practice is to basically use drones like this, where you actually make them okay to crash. So like something like this, if it hits you, you're going to be pissed, not injured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they actually now have standards for levels of pissed. So there's 4 categories for operation over people that the FAA do. The first is under 250 grams and no laceration hazard, so no exposed propeller. Second and third are actually an impact standard that's basically called getting hit by a little league wild pitch, getting hit by a high school wild pitch. And then there's full airworthiness certificate. I don't want to do that, but if I can do something like this that's crashable, then I can hope to get the FAA waivers needed to be able to do subsequent non-line of sight operation under the rules.
And there's not other technological solutions like using ultrasonics or some kind of PIR that might recognize birds near a certain group of things and make noises or blow compressed air or something like that?
There are those that do that too. The problem is the birds get kind of immune to it. So like just around harvest, it sounds like there's a lot of red-tailed hawks around. That's actually a system called Bird Guard, where they have recordings of birds. But there's also other things that you can do. So like one of the things that I'd like to do once I build the infrastructure and get flying with the visual recognition is go, oh, that's somebody else's drone. Let's go ram into it and take that out, because Ukraine would really love to have some drones that would be able to fly around and get rid of small Russian drones.
And I guess all technology eventually becomes militarized anyway.
Yep. And also, I'm a believer in peace through superior firepower.
Well, that's great. So you're going to be teaching, and you're just teaching basic computer science at Davis?
Yeah, so Davis is just a temporary gig for a year. I'm going to be teaching the non-major programming and then the major programming, 1 class a quarter.
So I took computer science. When I was in computer science, our curriculum was based around C, C++, Pascal, Then the university made a deal with the government to get some funding and switched over to Ada, which was a complete waste. I'm curious, what's the major technology that the majors in computer science revolve around now?
The first class in most circumstances is Python. I'm not a huge fan of Python, but that's partially because I still got burned by the Python 2 to 3 transition, where they created a new language, and basically I ended up with massive code bases that just don't work anymore. Thank you very much. There's still a lot of C and C++, which I think need to burn in the fires of hell. A fair bit of Java. I would like to...
So you prefer Java over C++?
Yes. And the reason why is C++ is a abomination to God and man from a security standpoint. Type-safe, memory-safe languages are essential.
But couldn't that be applied if you just use the right library with C++? You could accommodate that, right? You just don't trust programmers to even have that power?
No. First of all, if you actually want to write C++ that way, the number of smart pointer template shit that just blows up your code to something awful is big. But once you do that, why bother? Just use a language that takes care of all that crud for you. And what the test is garbage collectors. That 99% of the applications that people write, it's okay if the program is every now and then and a garbage collector goes. Because if you actually look at it at a microscopic scale, your Java program is doing something like that. It goes, the garbage collector kicks in, it pauses for a few milliseconds, continues. The garbage collector pauses those because there are a few milliseconds you never notice as a human. So any program that interacts with humans, just run a garbage collector. Have a nice day.
So what technologies, do you think are most, for people that are getting into computer science now, what areas of the industry and what technologies do you think give them the most opportunities as far as vocations and making a living?
First of all, be comfortable just learning new programming languages. That one of the things I did at Berkeley in the computer security class is the second project was a big, heavy design project in Golang. In Go. Students had never seen it before, never seen the language before. Here, go, use it. There's Go, I find I'm very productive in. Modern type-safe languages are way better. That if I have to start a new project, the 4 languages I'm going to pick from are Golang, Rust, Kotlin, and TypeScript. TypeScript gives me all the JavaScript goodnesses and all that with a good type system because it compiles to JavaScript. Kotlin gives me Java, but better. Good null handling, good type inference, etc., etc. Rust is a right royal pain in the bleep, but it has a party trick. No garbage collector. So you know what I was saying about those 98%, 99% of the programs that don't mind garbage collection? What about the 1% that do? The things like the embedded controller, the drone autopilot, the embedded system, the operating system. Rust is really good for that. And so, I do not believe that you can or should start a new project in C or C++ because all these alternatives are there that are provably better under whatever circumstance you're dealing with.
Where have you been seeing your students get jobs as of late?
All over, but I don't really pay attention because I can't. I've got too many. when you're dealing with small, intimate classes of 600, it's hard to keep track of what students go off and do.
Ouch, that's a large class. Well, Sal, anything else you want to add?
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah, it was a
Really
pleasure
appreciate
talking with you.
coming in and joining us.
If there's anything else that you've got going on or you want to promote, just let us know.
If somebody knows of funding for drone development, especially for Ukraine, please tell me. I've got multiple projects where I'm not enough personal bandwidth. I need to hire minions. I will not hire minions that work for free. I insist on paying my minions, and I need funding for them.
All right. So hopefully somebody out there might be able to respond to that. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and this was really great. And obviously, we're all kind of in alliance that this crypto mess needs to resolve itself as soon as possible.
The DOJ is the ultimate regulator of cryptocurrency, and they're finally doing their job.
There we go.
My Pacer bills are reflecting it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I guess we'll just end it right here. And if you ever want to come back on and you want to talk about anything else, just let us know.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much.